It's time for a little comedy, a little content, and a lot of conversation. It's the Geno Jones Show, exclusively right here on YouTube. Now here's your host, Geno Jones.
Good afternoon. Hello, it's showtime. What's happening, everybody? Yes, the Geno Jones Variety Show. It's here. A little tardy. On CP time a little bit. So I am live Monday through Friday around 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 if you're in Chicago, 3:30 out on the West Coast. So let me start off by saying, please like, share, and subscribe. Whatever you do, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel right here. I got my guest today is one of my regular contributors, and I'm really honored and happy to have a team of just brilliant people as contributors, experts in their particular field to come up with some solutions and give some answers and just have some compelling conversation, enlightening, and you can learn something today. I'm sure you're going to learn a lot in terms of, we talked about self-care a couple weeks ago, so we're going to expand that conversation. And do you know the difference between like anxiety, stress and trauma? Especially like stress and trauma. Well, we're going to talk about that today, okay? In the last 18 months, we have had to live with, and for nearly 600,000 Americans have died from COVID-19. Now, we've witnessed the murders of George Floyd and Andrew Brown Jr. and Ronald Green and Jason Sutherland here in North Charleston, South Carolina. And we heard about Breonna Taylor being murdered in her own bedroom, and we saw the video of Ahmaud Arbery and Jacob Green in Kenosha, Wisconsin, that shot in his back in front of his kids, and he was paralyzed. So it's just been, it's been traumatic in so many ways. Also, many of us have lost jobs, businesses, homes, income, loved ones. There's been an increase of shootings all across America. Some would call street violence. Anxiety and trauma are at levels that we probably haven't seen in decades, if ever. Just imagine, we've had a once in a century global health pandemic. We've had a racial reckoning that we may have never had, a type of racial reckoning like we have had in the last 18 months, right? But it's a lot. You can't turn on the television, you can't watch the news, you can't look on your phone, you can't look on your social media feeds for videos. I mean, and then the unleashing and the making it cool and acceptable for the energy of hate and racism and white supremacy that's really been unleashed in the last 4 years. It's all come together. It's accumulated like boulders. And for many people, they can't hold up. They haven't been able to hold up mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So what can we do about it? All right, we know that, Geno. Damn that. We need help. A brother or sister needs help, need answers. Well, I got the right person for you today. Like I said, my guest, she's been on with me before, one of my regular contributors. She is a licensed family and marriage therapist, an addiction counselor. She is on the board chair of the board of directors of People Against Rape, PAR. She counseled the survivors and the community here in the Charleston, South Carolina metro area after the massacre, the Mother Emanuel Church massacre. She is currently working with the mental health, I should say she's currently working with, we call it down here, MUSC, the Medical University of South Carolina, bringing to the show on camera. There she is, ladies and gentlemen, dear friend, and just a brilliant, brilliant sister, brilliant woman, Tenelle Jones. Hello, Tenelle. How are you?
Good evening. How are you? Thanks for having me again.
I told you, man, every time when you come on, I see your face and hear your voice. It just man, it's like a good sedative. It just chills me out. It's like a melatonin tablet before you go to sleep. You know that melatonin can help you sleep and help kind of
Melatonin.
reduce some of that anxiety. Please receive that in a good way, because I meant that in a positive way.
I got
So.
it. Thank you.
So I know you and I talked before the show, and you heard my monologue. So where would you start in terms of, just giving us some tips, some strategy, some advice in terms of how to just manage the levels of anxiety and the depression, stress and trauma. Maybe a good place to start. And like I said, we actually had a chance to have a conversation before the show today. The difference between stress that we deal with, trauma, then you got anxiety and depression kind of thrown up in there. So why don't you explain so we'll know exactly what the hell we're dealing with here?
Sure, yeah. So I'll start with stress. Stress can be pretty much anything. I like to say that it can be physical challenges, and so stress really is like anything physical, emotional, anything that you're going through minus your capacity. So what that means is everybody doesn't have like certain things that make them distressed. Some people can become stressed easily. And then there are things that we go through that are like naturally stressing, like if you decide to run a marathon, like that can be, stressful. So stress is just really, it just impacts people differently. Everybody is not stressed by the same things, but it can cause, you have acute stress, which is something that might be happening, that's like really short term stress. But if you don't address that, then it can lead into long term stress, which will lead into long term problems,
Wow.
such as with your physical health, your sleep, your appetite, how you engage with other people, right? So stress is very common. Is more common than trauma, but trauma is very common. So trauma is a wide range of stressful situations that involve high levels of danger, fear, helplessness, horror, and these high levels of distress are evoked in most people, right? And so those things typically are very specific in terms of you have to experience childhood of physical abuse or sexual abuse or
Okay.
emotional abuse, partner abuse, whether it's emotional, physical, sexual, being assaulted in any way, physical attacks or assaults, rape, sexual violence, serious car accidents, sudden loss or death of a person, torture, obviously war if you've been in war or combat, fire, any type of involvement in natural disasters. So if we have an earthquake, hurricane, all of those, if you are in that, can be very traumatic. And that's if you're directly involved in it. You can also experience that if you're witnessing it or hearing about it from something horrible from another person. So being exposed to watching, like, this past few years, we've seen a lot of videos come out
Yes.
witnessing people being killed, murdered. And so watching that happen can be very traumatic for individuals as well. Now, again, everybody doesn't have like the maybe I would say the impact of trauma. It impacts people differently, and we'll talk about how that impacts individuals differently. But with trauma, what you will find, so if you are experiencing trauma and it's really impacting you, what you'll notice is that you're having symptoms such as you're trying to have, like we call it intrusive thoughts, meaning maybe you're having traumatic nightmares, maybe you're starting to have flashbacks about what you witnessed or what you've been involved in, involuntary or recurrent memories of that traumatic experience over and over and over again, or just intense or prolonged distress that you're feeling. The second part of that was what we call avoidance. So again, maybe you start avoiding the trauma related things, or you're not, any thoughts that come up, you try to avoid that by either Most people commonly avoid those by drinking, right? You might know, like you've heard probably
Right.
there's been an increase in alcohol and drug
Yeah.
use. So you want to avoid thoughts, feelings, people, places, conversations, activities, maybe even situations that may remind you of that traumatic event. The other part of that, if you've been impacted by trauma, is a change in your mood and your cognition. So that's how you think and then how you feel. So with that, you probably have difficulties recalling certain things. You start to have negative beliefs about yourself, about the world, maybe feeling alienated, inability to feel positive emotions. So you're just walking around really struggling with sadness, anger, guilt, shame, irritability, which then goes into the fourth category of arousal and reactivity, which includes irritability. Maybe you're being more aggressive if you've experienced trauma. You might be more self destructive, like hurting yourself, obviously. Hypervigilant, that's when you're constantly like on the lookout, looking for the next thing to happen. Having an exaggerated startle response, so you might be easily, startled if you've experienced some trauma. Problems with concentration, and of course, sleep problems. Um, so I, so those are some common things that people experience when they are having a reaction to being exposed to trauma. Again, not everybody experiences all of those. Some people have different levels of degrees to that. Um, but untreated, obviously, or not, if you don't take care of it, it can, just like long-term stress, it can be problematic if you don't address it.
Wow. So what would you deem long-term stress?
Long-term stress could be, so for example, you let's see, maybe you lose a job and you are having difficulties finding another one, and
Okay.
so you start beating yourself up, right? And then
Gotcha.
now, yeah, so now you're struggling because you don't have so you don't have the ability to do what you need to do. So I have, there's a continuum. So you might have what we call, there are chosen things that can cause us stress. Like if I chose to go run a marathon, or whenever I go work out at a fitness center, like that's stress, right? But it's chosen. You have side effects. So a side effect could be, let's say you're texting and driving, that's a stressful experience, but now you have a broken leg or on top of that. So yeah, that's a side effect because now you have to deal with the broken leg. Then you can have life happens. Life happens is a part of like what we experienced this year of the pandemic. Like you have no control.
Yeah.
Life happens. It is what it is. Another thing that you can look at is other people's choices, right? So we can be impacted by the other things that people do, whether it's intentional or unintentional. So that's another thing that can impact or cause adversity. And I think another one is just, again, like just part of life. Like as you grow old, like you, Gino, your daughter going to college, that can be stressful, right?
Yeah. Yeah, when that tuition
So
bill comes and you don't have the money, yeah, it can be
yeah,
very stressful.
so it's those are a part of life challenges. But essentially, challenges represents gaps of what's currently happening and what you imagine, want, or hope for. So that's a stressful situation. So what's happening is you lost your job, but what you imagine, what you hope for, what you want is to have another job, is to have income. So that gap is how people become stressed because they, have a perception about what they believe should be happening versus actually what is happening. So
So
I'm
for
just trying to break that down a little clearer so
Well,
everybody
no,
can
I think you did
understand
a
the
good job,
difference.
but let me ask you something, because I think you did a good job. Can some of those stressful situations? This might be a dumb question, but I'm going to ask because
No such
you'll never
thing.
know. Thank you.
Mhm.
Some of those stressful situations can lead into or trigger trauma. Yes or no?
Only if in the trauma of you losing your job and then you get in your car and you get into a bad accident.
Or what about if
So
you lose your job and then maybe unfortunately you lose your home and maybe if you're in a marriage, your marriage or a relationship goes bad, could an accumulation of that eventually turn into something traumatic or no?
that's just stress, which
Okay.
can lead to things like anxiety, depression,
Ah,
obviously,
okay.
but not trauma. So
Okay.
trauma again is going to be where you there's a sense of danger
Okay.
that's that's aligned with that you might be experiencing. Again, that fear, that hopelessness, um, just high levels of horror and distress.
So I guess the easy way to understand it is trauma is unlike stress. Trauma is connected to, like you said, I think the key phrase there is danger. I mean, something life threatening or potentially life threatening.
Hmm.
Is that a good way
Correct.
to understand it?
Yes.
So
Hmm.
what's the best way for us to deal with? Because I know um, a lot of people talk about the collective trauma that we, especially as black people in America, have dealt with. And I know I asked you something earlier. I'm just trying to get an understanding. I have seen and read to where uh, trauma in an extreme case. I remember reading and hearing about, I believe, a study of the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. So obviously, and I think about us as Black Americans, we've got our ancestors, the Middle Passage, slavery, and everything that encountered. But in this study of
Hmm.
the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, there was some data that said that, I guess, the researchers were able to determine that somehow that trauma, almost like PTSD, somehow was in the DNA of the grandchildren. Um, is that some research or some studies that you are familiar with? Is that uh, you being an expert in this field, that sound plausible? Can that has do you think that's something that we as African Americans are dealing with on some type of level, just a collective uh, PTSD or trauma based on the experience that our ancestors have gone through?
So yeah, so now more people are talking about racial trauma, the impact of racial trauma. I'm not familiar with those particular studies. However, the constant witnessing of the violence against, African Americans, Black people that we watch on TV or social media,
Yeah.
hearing about those stories, because again, it's the witnessing or hearing about something horrible that has happened to another person. It can again evoke the sense of fear, helplessness, horror, danger. So definitely, but doesn't not everybody again will be impacted. But it is a possibility that if you um, if you are and you don't address it or acknowledge it, then it can become something greater than yourself.
So, what are some of the steps that any of us who feel like we are dealing with the stress, or maybe we've experienced something traumatic and don't really realize we don't realize how it's impacting us? It's having an impact, but maybe uh, the manifestation of the trauma is showing in different ways, and we know something's not right, but we can't identify it. What are some of the steps to mitigate that, to eliminate it, or if you're kind of in the middle of that storm, what's the best way to deal with it, and at what point do you need to say, I think I need to seek some help with this and talk to a professional because this is a bit too much. What would you
Mhm.
recommend?
Yeah, so all of the things that I mentioned with the intrusion, the arousal, the negative mood and cognitions, if you're experiencing any of those, you should definitely reach out for help because those are symptoms that are aligned with post-traumatic stress disorder. Um, Anything else, if you're noticing that you're having difficulty sleeping, like sleeping is a really important. If you are feeling really anxious, meaning you're having difficulty controlling your worry, you feel like your mind is racing all the time, you can't stay present. You just feel irritable constantly. Again, just kind of in a negative mood state. You're avoiding being in social situations. You're starting to isolate. So any major shift in how you were functioning to now, have that awareness. So maybe just again, just step back and say, how have I changed? Is something going on with me? Let me examine. So you have to do a self-assessment first, just to say, hmm, maybe I've gained weight and I'm not even trying to lose weight or gain weight, right? Or maybe you've lost weight. I'm not sleeping well. I don't really want to talk to my family anymore because I just don't, I'm not in the mood. I just feel disconnected. Um, so those are some really good key indicators that you may need to reach out or see what's going on if if you're having some difficulty.
Because you mentioned eating or loss of appetite. Something that I've learned, really, I guess, got to nail down over the last, I guess, year and a half. That and I guess it's kind of been there. I'm an emotional eater. And I talk to people and say, yeah, I'm an emotional eater. As a matter of fact, I know my oldest daughter. She said, Dad, so am I. I'm an emotional eater. She said, I eat my stress.
Hmm.
There are healthier ways to deal with that. Some people, they self-medicate. They don't use food. They use drugs, alcohol. You talked about that
Hmm.
earlier. Some
Yeah.
use sex, gambling, other
Hmm.
destructive vices. So give us some positive vices, some things that we could do to try to reverse that process or stop it, interrupt it, and try to get back to some sense of, I guess, a new normal. I don't know if this, maybe the old normal wasn't that healthy to begin with.
Right. Yeah, I don't like the word normal. I would say again, the first thing is awareness. So noticing what emotions you are having. Unfortunately, this society has gotten and like telling people that certain emotions aren't good, and so I think we're typically comfortable with people who are angry, happy, um, and what's another common, and maybe anxious. Those are like a lot of the emotions that we're
Yeah.
okay with. But people who are experiencing grief, so with all the loss that the pandemic has brought on, you might be feeling some grief, especially if you've lost people suddenly, then that can be traumatic. We call that a traumatic loss.
Okay.
So you could have some of those trauma experiences as well, especially if you witnessed the way that they died.
Yeah.
So yeah, so having that awareness, knowing that the emotions that you're having are okay, start paying attention to what your mind is telling you, because that's really where a lot of it comes from, is our perception. You've probably heard, that life is 10% what happens to you, 90% what you believe about it, or what your perceptions
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
So really learning how to reframe things, change your perception, think about things differently. Recognize your internal resources, right? So we always focus on the things that we cannot do. What are your strengths? What are your character strengths? There's a really good character strength survey that I usually encourage people to take. Is You can go to this website called VIA, V as in Victor, IA, character.org. You take it, it tells you have your 24 character strengths. Learn how to use them to address some of the things that you're going through. Um, Pay attention to the acute stressors so that they don't become huge stressors. So when something comes up, engage in that problem solving, that's needed to address it. And if you can't, I also want to tell people, recognize that some things just cannot be solved. So that means you just have to change the way you are in that situation, how you want to move through that situation. So again, another common analogy is that the way that you swim in a pool and the way that you swim in a lake and the way that you swim in the ocean are all different ways of swimming. So you have to accept that maybe right now this is a pool, so what the requirements are different than what you would use over here. So acceptance is a really significant part of that. And acceptance doesn't mean that it's okay, right? Acceptance means that you recognize what's happening, what you can do about it or what you cannot do about it, and then you take care of yourself in that moment instead of, again, not taking care of yourself.
Kind of accept, acknowledge, and act on the things that you can control, and be at peace with, or understand the things you can't control. Let that go and move on, because all it's going to
Right.
do is add to the stress and anxiety if you focus on the part of whatever the problem is that
Right.
that you can't control. Like, okay, well, I can't fix
Right.
that. I can fix me, or I can adjust the situation, or extract myself from the situation, or whatever. What is that
Yeah.
that website? And you said 24. There are 24 different character
Character strengths that,
strength.
yes.
Give us that website again, because I want to. I'm gonna check. I'm curious. I want to see that myself and kind of see where I
Yeah,
measure up at.
it's V as in Victor, IA character.org. And so go, you do this, it's a free survey. You're going to take the survey and it's going to give you all 24 of your character strengths, your five top signature character strengths, your middle strengths, and then your lesser strengths. Typically, the top five are the strengths that we use often. They're effortlessly, Um, they don't require a lot of energy. So those strengths, again, you might use, but you want to learn how to use all of them, right? Because they're all important. The lesser strengths are like probably mostly your forgotten strengths. You just really struggle with it. So for example, if forgiveness might be, if you struggle with forgiveness, then it might be the bottom of in your lesser strengths. So, but all of them you can build up, you can really focus on. Um, Something else is just within all of the dangers that we experience day after day,
Yeah.
learn how to find the opportunities in there to be you, to be great, to do what matters most. Those are some things that you can do as well to help you deal with stress. Sometimes we're only focused on the negative aspects of it versus how can I grow in this? How can I move in this? Again, if it's something that's important, what can I do to make a difference? And just do it if that's something that you want to do.
Thank you, Tenelle. That is so important, and I'm glad that you went there, because there's a saying there is opportunity in chaos, and I've heard that phrase before. I didn't invent it, but the way
Mhm.
I've tried the last 18 months. I have tried to do that, and I'm like, okay, in the midst of this chaos, there's an opportunity for me to grow, for me to grow
Mhm.
my business, and actually the fact that I'm able to do this show and stand here and talk to you. And I've done this in the midst of this global pandemic and the racial reckoning and everything else. So I guess there's some truth to that. Where would you come down on that phrase that I'm sure you've heard many times people say?
Yeah, that goes back to what I was saying. So if there's a dangerous situation, again, looking at what opportunities exist for you to shift the situation or just shift yourself, right? Just shift what you see, what you can do, what you think about, maybe whatever the situation is, or maybe what you think about yourself. Oftentimes, the worst enemy is ourselves and what our mind is telling us about who we are,
Yes.
thinking I can't do, I'm not good enough, or this is never going to work until you get into your mind, or what's the point? Unfortunately, like a lot of our young people are there, which is a whole nother topic, just discussing the mental health of young people today. But so yeah, just finding the opportunities to really use your values, use your character strengths to move through the situation the best way, knowing that the situation is not going to change.
So I got a two-part question before I let you go, and
Yes.
thank you once again. I so love having you on as a guest, and I thank you so much because I always feel smarter after I get through talking to you.
Too much.
Listen, I do. I'm just being honest. So, uh, since we talked about food playing a huge part in terms of how we deal with stress, uh, are there certain foods that just offhand that you would recommend to stay away from, or outside of of course, alcohol and drugs? You wouldn't encourage anyone to self-medicate. That's, I would think, obvious, but I guess obviously it's not obvious for everybody else. And just maybe a couple just basic tips if you feel that the stress kind of getting out of control that you would recommend to somebody in terms of how they could try to um, put the brakes on the stress, and especially in the context of the last 18 months and everything from a pandemic and the just the like you said, the witnessing the murders on camera of all these unarmed black people, and then the hostility, the racial, the racism, and the I guess the more openness of just white supremacy and hate in so many different forms. So what are maybe just a couple tips that you would just give somebody to kind of manage that and kind of turn that thermostat down somewhat?
Yeah, so you mentioned food. I would say anything, if you decide to do anything to get rid of an emotion, that's probably not helpful. So it's okay to have these emotions, just create space with them. So if you're eating to feel better, then that's probably not a healthy thing anyway. But obviously, sugar, anything that has a lot of sugar in it
Hmm.
is probably not going to be good for
Okay.
your mood. If you
Why
drink
is
a lot of,
what?
hmm?
I'm sorry. I'm just curious. Is there a biological reason that you know of? Does it? Does it?
Well, I mean, sugar is not healthy, so
Sort of obvious, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But
I'm not a nutritionist, but I do recognize that your gut health, like gut health, is very important. So, how we feel, like if you're sick and you're not taking care of yourself, guess what? Things are going to be a lot more stressful.
right, and then
So
certain
you want to
foods. No, go finish because I was just going to ask you
no,
about the chemical dopamine. You hear a lot of talk about that. Certain foods, just like certain substances, affect the part of your brain that produces dopamine. So I guess is there a healthy food that affects it? You and I talked about off camera about exercise. I know for me, the endorphins
exercise.
that your body releases. I know marathon runners get it, but even if you have a really strenuous workout. I know for me, after a really good workout, which I hadn't had in about, unfortunately, a year because, once COVID hit, I didn't trust the gym. So I canceled my
Yeah,
membership. So we're gonna reverse, we're gonna reinstate that membership. But I've been getting my cardio in
yeah,
the last couple of weeks. So yeah,
good.
is there certain food that affects that part of your brain, that the pleasure section of your brain, I guess they would call it?
Yeah, I think there are lots of healthy foods, like, and obviously, green leafy vegetables are really good for you. So, but I would say talk, like, because I don't, especially if you're diabetic, you want to make sure you're talking to your doctor
Yeah,
about
good
what
point.
you can and cannot eat
Yeah.
if you have a health condition. Even with physical exercise, obviously always talk to your physician, but you don't always have to go to a gym to be physically active. So I do want to say that it's very important to know. And it was something else I wanted to say because I think it's important. Oh yeah, so the easiest, freest thing that you can do when you're feeling stressed, it costs you nothing, and you have it within you, is to breathe. If you all would just, it calms your brain, right? So if you, and it's not the inhalation that matters, it's the exhalation that really
Oh,
relaxes
really?
your nervous system. So
Wow.
you inhale slowly, you might hold that for 2 seconds, and you exhale slowly. If you do that throughout the day, maybe at the top of each hour, you are already doing wonders for your body.
Wow. Because you gave us the exercise on camera the last time you were on.
Yes.
But I'm
Yeah.
glad because, and I'll just raise my hand. I believe many people like myself probably thought the most important part of that exercise was the inhaling. But I'm
Mhm.
glad you set me straight. You said the most important part, which you would common sense, Geno, duh, how come you couldn't figure that out? It's like exhaling is like, okay, you are exhaling whatever the stress
Yeah.
or negative energy. Is that a good way to look at it?
Yeah, so even as you inhale, if you inhale now, you automatically feel your body start to like get the stress, right? Because you
Hmm.
and you hold your breath, that's some distress, but it's that exhalation that really causes that release. And then if you do it in a way that it helps you relieve tension, if you straighten up your spine, align your heart, your head, and your spine with your feet, relax your shoulders, and then
There
you
you
just
go.
breathe. That can shift a lot. And I know again it seems very like too easy, but it's you cannot do anything. You can't solve anything if you're not calm, if your body's not calm,
True.
if your mind's not calm. So
Yes.
that is the first step, is to just learn how to calm your body by using your breath, exhaling um, as much as you can.
Thank you, Tenelle. Like I said, I do.
Okay.
I feel I am calmer and smarter every time I talk to you. By the end of the
Well, thank you.
conversation, I'm more relaxed. The stress level is like down to zero, and I feel smarter. I'm ready to take the SAT and ACT
Thank you.
test all over again.
I feel tongue tied because I've been talking all day. So
I,
I'm trying to
well,
find like,
I apologize because I parachuted in on you at the last minute, but thank you so much. I'm glad that God just the Spirit put it on my heart to reach out to you, and you have the heart you always giving to people. So please give people your contact information. Anyone who's watching now, if you really are just going through something and you feel this anxiety or depression or stress has affected you in some negative way, like you heard Tenelle kind of give you the warning signs in terms of how maybe your mood or, as you say, cognition, the way you look at life in the world, if you see that's changed dramatically, or people are telling you, and maybe you're in denial and you don't want to admit it, how they can get in touch with you to utilize your services?
Yeah, you can just give me a call or text at 843-364-7798.
And your social media. Give us your social media information.
I'm on Facebook as Tenelle Jones, so you can look me up.
And that's Tenelle. Right.
Yes,
Okay. So we can say
yes.
just Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, any other?
Yeah, I think it's all connected.
Okay.
You find me.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Tenelle. So you can
Thank you.
stop talking now because I have talked. I have added to that stress level of you having to talk so much.
It's okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. Well, looking forward to talking to you again. Thank you so much.
All right.
She
Bye-bye.
she is really brilliant, and I do every time we talk, I feel relaxed. It's just her presence. Like I talked about before, there's some people in life, they provide energy, they give energy in life, and you got some folks that they drain your energy and just take the life right out of your body if you let them. So she is obviously the energy source and the light source. She gives you light and energy and work on that breathing. Yeah, thank you. I hope that worked out for you. I hope you were able to get those tips and check out that website she was talking about. Thank you for letting me be a part of your life. As always, God bless each and every one of you. God, most of all, thank you for letting me do the Geno Jones Daily Variety Show, Monday through Friday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:30 Central, 3:30 out on the West Coast. Shout out to Mr. Markel Bailey, the official barber and hairstylist for the Geno Jones Show. Check him out on Instagram, on IG, KELBECUTTIN, Kelby Cutting. Also, shout out to Mr. Bruce Gage, the official wardrobe and stylist. He's the wardrobe consultant and stylist for the Geno Jones Show. Yeah, that's right. So I got this blazer from, in case you're wondering. Yeah, oh yeah. Spring, we bringing out the colors. We're representing, it reflects my mood and personality. Bright, vibrant, happy, full of energy. So check Mr. Bruce Gage out. You can check him out on Instagram. Just do a search. Type in Bruce Gage, Gage, Bruce Gage. All right. If you would like to advertise, if you would like for me to be, actually, I should say, if you would like to be a sponsor, if you would like for me to be the pitch man for your product, I'd be honored to have you as a sponsor on the show. I'd be honored to have you advertise on the show. I would be honored to be the pitch man for your business, your product, your good, or your services. Reach out to me. Geno Jones Show on Gmail or at Gmail. Geno Jones Show at Gmail. Or leave me a message right here on my YouTube channel. I love each and every one of you. Thank you so much for watching. All right. I really hope this show helped you out because it's just the last 18 months have really just been a challenge for so many of us. And so many of us are just trying to reset ourselves or just, come out on the other side of this whole situation better than we were 18 months ago. So I hope the show contributed to that. Hey, listen, this Friday is going to be it's going to be a fire show. Next Monday and Tuesday will mark 100 years since the Tulsa Race Massacre. So we're going to have a very powerful conversation, actually Friday and next week. So Friday's going to be part one, and then next Tuesday, Monday is Memorial Day. I'll take the day off probably, even though I love doing this show. And we'll talk about in detail the Tulsa Race Massacre. And that's not the only one, but next Monday, May 31st and June 1st, will mark 100 years since that horrible event. Definitely, there's a lot to talk about. It's going to be a fire show. I got some great guests that I've already confirmed for the show. All right, everybody. Like I said, I love you. I really do, Mother. I love you more than life itself. Go breathe. Like Tenelle said, and it's free. Go outside, take a good walk, and just practice breathing and exhaling. And just exhale all of that stress and negativity out of your body, mind, soul, and spirit. You and me tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. once again. And shout out to all my small business owners and my entrepreneurs. I want to get you on the show. I'd love to have you as a guest, tell your story. And like I said, I'd love to have you as a sponsor or advertise or pitch your product. So reach out. Please reach out to me. Geno Jones Show at Gmail. Leave me a message right here. Until tomorrow, Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, once again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, be blessed.
Subscribe and tune in to the next episode of The Geno Jones Show, exclusively right here on YouTube.